Hola,
Aló, Daniela.
¿cómo estáis?
Bien, ¿y tú cómo
Ay,
estás?
y oye, ¿de quién es el mail que estamos viendo?
¿Qué cosa no te escucho?
Estamos viendo un mail. Alguien está compartiendo una... ¿Pero y la página?
Sí, se ve que está ahí compartiendo tu correo.
No voy a avisar.
Qué temprano es acá. Dani, ¿está ahí?
Ujú. ¿Qué
¿Puedes
pasó?
colocarme como intérprete?
Ya.
¿Estás desayunando? Yo también.
Sí.
Estoy, bueno, tomando café. Ese es mi desayuno.
Intérprete Patricia González. Listo. Ahí. salvando todo para allá. Estoy coordinando todo para allá. Ya.
No, yo se los paso. Perfecto. It's like justo, justo 4. So hello to everyone. We are so happy to have you here. Today we have a great announcement to make that we're going to hear about Laura, and also Jonathan. We're going to talk about the waste methane assessment platform. This is an announce. We're not launching the platform because that is going to happen the next COP. Today we're going to talk about the design, about what we are thinking for this platform, and we want to hear about what you think also. So we are going to have a great presentation from Lara Huntington, it's like that? Probably no. From RMI, you know. She is the climate manager at RMI, and Jonathan Bank, who is the methane director at Clean Air Task Force. The volume? Oh, maybe it's me. There it's fair? Okay. And after that, we are going to have a conversation with great panelists. We have here Helen, he's the head of climate change at IDB Invest. We have also Ramiro Fernandez, who is the campaign director of UN Climate Champion. We have Gabriel, who is the chief scientist at IGSD. Thanks, Gabriel. And we have also Carlos Silva, who is the president at ISWI, you know, and the director presidente of Abralpe, which is great. So we know 18% of the total emissions came from organic waste. That is of the total global methane emission. That is what we are going to talk today, because we need action, and for action, we need data. So we're going to talk about this platform. My name is Carolina Urmeneta. I am from the Global Methane Hub, and I am the program director for circular economy and waste. The Global Methane Hub is a new organization, and it's a philanthropic effort in order to align funding to methane mitigation. We are focused on 3 areas, of course, energy, agriculture, and waste. And what we do is to drive support and to drive coordination and collaboration to methane advocacy, you know? So that is why we're together with RMI, CATF, and these great panelists to hear about this collaboration and coordination in this waste methane assessment platform. And Laura, the floor is now yours.
Thank you so much for having me today and for your partnership in all of this work. I'm here today on behalf of my other colleagues at RMI, Tom Frankowitz and Evan Ayandele, who unfortunately weren't able to attend, so I'm here in their stead, and I'm helping announce the Waste Methane Assessment Platform on behalf of RMI and Clean Air Task Force and Global Methane Hub. We're really excited about this effort. So just to scene set a bit, I'll start by giving a bit of an overview of the challenge that we're facing. Methane is an ultra-potent greenhouse gas. It accounts for 30% of global warming and represents 84 times the greenhouse gas warming potential of CO2 over a 20-year period. So this is a critical gas to abate in the very near future. And the waste sector is the 3rd largest source of this ultra-potent greenhouse gas in the world. And it contributes about 20% of methane emissions globally. Waste methane primarily comes from municipal solid waste sources, but it also comes from wastewater. And until recently, this source of methane globally has been fairly overlooked. So that's why we're really emphasizing this problem today. So what are we doing about it? We collectively are taking a 2-pronged approach to waste methane mitigation with 2 efforts that are designed as a feedback loop. The first, which I'll talk about, is the waste map, or the waste methane assessment platform. And this is really designed to be an open source platform for countries to access primarily data to inform decision making, as well as tools and roadmaps and playbooks that can actively support those decisions that they make on the ground. And this will have a clear emphasis on local and subnational efforts, given that that's where most of the action will need to be taking place. This waste map will work in concert with the country deep dives, which Jonathan will talk through in a moment. And those are emphasis on specific countries and specific on the ground work with nations that are trying to figure out how to evaluate and how to assess and how to mitigate methane from the waste sector. So those country deep dives will work in concert with this waste map to bring more data, bring more knowledge into that platform over time. So to dive a bit deeper into what this waste map effort is, we're really picturing this as an open access data and knowledge repository more broadly. We'll bring in data from a variety of sources, both bottom up and top down estimates, as well as measurements of methane emissions. And this will bring in together the baseline knowledge that we have about methane emission sources from the waste sector, as well as current inventories, current models, as well as the satellite measured data and other measured data about methane emissions. And collectively, we hope to create a holistic picture of what emissions from the sector are, as well as concrete toolkits for how countries and governments and other actors in this ecosystem can tangibly work to address them. So this goes far beyond data visualization. It's really designed to support country action on the ground. And next slide. So just to wrap up, we really hope that this tool can be used and iterated over time to really support active decision making in this sector globally, and that we can use this together with our colleagues from RMI. They're working on our Energy Transitions Academy to support kind of collective work to better understand and build capacity on this topic globally. Thank you so much.
If I stand up, I'll be in the way of the screen. So I've spent a lot of time this week squatting in front of screens to keep my head out of it, so I'm not going to do that. Hi, everyone. I'm Jonathan Banks. I'm the Global Director for the Methane Pollution Prevention Program at the Clean Air Task Force. I'm really excited about today's announcement. Thrilled with, Carolina, what you all are doing to, as Laura said, take what's been a largely ignored source in the debate around methane pollution and elevate that on a global scale that brings about change and action and emission reductions. It's really amazing, the collective work, not just of the Global Methane Hub, but of the Grantham Foundation and others that are coming forward to take this ignored source and put it on a different level. For years, the only thing any of us really talked about was oil and gas methane, and I'm as guilty as anyone else of that. I've spent my entire career basically working on that. So I'm really, really excited that that's changing, and we're moving aggressively forward to push the change, the policy that will start to cut emissions in the waste sector. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what we'll be doing within the country deep dives within the whole waste map program. One of the aspects that we're going to be working on is to engage directly with citizens to begin to pilot a tool to locate and evaluate dump sites and other areas where trash is going that aren't documented. So this will be still working on it, but it'll be a tool that allows geotagged locations from photos to be able to upload waste sites that we didn't know about, that we have to work on to get better data on. One of the data problems that we have in the waste sector is that they're not managed. Not every site is a managed site, so we can't just sit there and go, oh, this is where the dump is, everyone knows where the dump is. A lot of these are not mapped, they're not known, and we have to create something that begins to target those and begins to map those out. So we're going to pilot a tool in a few locations that will begin to let us evaluate how this works. If we can come up with a system that works, we will be expanding this dramatically to other countries and other locations. So more to come on that as we get further along on this. Next slide. Also on the country deep dives, we will be doing a tremendous amount of work working with national and local governments to feed back and forth from the Waste Map platform, both data and technical and policy support. So this is a two-way street that will allow us to be working with local governments to see what their concerns are, what their issues that they're trying to face are. Data that they have will be then fed up through to Waste Map, but Waste Map data then and best practices will also be coming back down to allow us to work with local communities, with governments, to empower them with the work, with the things they need in order to move forward on mitigating methane emissions in the sector. This is something that has been done for years in other sectors like the oil and gas sector, and this effort of overcoming those barriers that we, sorry, oh, that was really loud. Now you'll listen to me. This effort of overcoming those barriers, you know, when you go into a country, whether it's oil and gas or waste, the first thing that anyone is going to say to you is, we have no idea how much we emit, how can we reduce our emissions? Well, we're never going to know exactly how much we emit because that's just the nature of methane, but we have to get over that barrier so that we get from this barrier of lack of data and inaction to policy and action that starts to reduce emissions. So the tool combined with the on-the-ground work is designed to overcome that barrier and move quickly to actionable things that start to cut emissions. So with that, I think that's, oh, sorry, one more slide. Forgot the locations. So first, the Waste Map tool, this is not the map of the Waste Map tool, just to be clear. The Waste Map tool is global. This is a map simply of the very first year of the deep dives that we've planned thus far in a few key countries. We'll be focusing on Ecuador, Colombia, Mexico, the US, Nigeria, and India. Again, this is just the deep dives. This is where we'll be working very closely with local governments, local citizens, national governments. This list will expand dramatically in year 2 and year 3, and that map is going to look a lot different as we move forward. So that's, I just want to make sure that you don't think that that's where the tool is going to be working. So with that, I will close. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Laura and Jonathan. That was great to understand what we are talking about. And now we are going to have a panel, to discuss about this. So please welcome, and thank you again to you. Welcome Helen, Ramiro, Gabriel, and Carlos to here to have a small talk about this. We are talking about this waste methane assessment platform, because what we are talking about when we talk about waste is that we know that we have information, but we have, for example, information from the inventories, which is top-down information. And we heard right now that we are going to have that information, but also information at facility scale, which is bottom-up approach. And we need to make synergies on that, and we need to promote investment in this sector in order to have better management practice on waste. So I want to ask you first, Helen. Helen is the head of climate change at the IDB Invest. And when we talk about the waste sector, we are talking about innovative policies and strategies to reduce methane emissions and increasing climate risk related to fires and dumps and landfills. how the IDB Invest could use this waste map to help countries in Latin America to leverage international funds for climate action. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolina. Thank you. Can you hear me now? Okay. It's strange to kind of eat the microphone to talk. Anyway, so thank you so much for inviting us. I think we have, all of us are trying to figure out how to measure, because if we can measure, we can act on it. And enhancing the measurement of methanes from west side can also not only support policy reform, as they were talking before, and give guidance, but it also, at least from the private sector, it allows us to engage with private sector clients to commit to new KPIs. And we can link to new financial instruments, maybe a sustainability-linked bond or a sustainability-linked loan, where we can say, you know, this is your baseline, and having the data to have and to show the baseline, and then say, this is this trajectory or the pathway that you have to achieve, and then you could access some type of financial incentives, is critical. Having that data, it's also important to engage in the conversations with the clients from the start. And that's why the Waste Data Hub as well, that you're working with the water division, the water and sanitation division of the IDB, is very important and very complementary of these maps. And I think that in a way, one of the points that I think is important is to coordinate all these initiatives, to put together all in one platform that it will allow the private sector companies to have access to, and then determine what kind of instruments they want to use.
Thank you, Helen. That's great, because yes, we are talking about investment, we are talking about the private sector, and the one that leads this effort are the local governments, no? Because they are the one that has the policies, they are the one that have the instruments. So today we have Ramiro Fernandez, who is the campaign director for UN Climate Champion. And on June, the UN Climate Champion team include in the Race to Zero campaign a pledge to have 34% of methane mitigation, you know? So we want to understand with how many, for example, how many local governments are working with you? What are, could you tell us if they are including methane mitigation in their goals? Are they considering actions to reduce methane from the waste sector? That is where we're coming from the investment and the private sector to the local governments to understand how we could match them, of course, because they work together, and how we could help with this waste map to leverage that.
Sure, thanks Carolina. Thanks for the invitation, and it's a pleasure to work with the Methane Hub on this. Yes, just to organize our data a little bit. Race to Zero, it is a global campaign to mobilize non-state actors towards net zero and halving emissions by 2030. We have 11,000 members in it. 8,000 of them are cities, almost 600 investors, and more than 1,100 are cities into that, and 52 regions. I think the pledge that you mentioned, it is related to the sectorial breakthroughs. We have the 2030 breakthroughs, and each of the sectors of the economy, we're monitoring 28 sectors of the economy and defining goals and targets in those sectors. So I think that's what the methane means. But we do have in the cities, and the more than 1,000 cities that are in the campaign today, they join to a partner to an initiative which is Cities Race to Zero, which is a partnership between C40, ICLEI, and the Global Convening of Mayors. And they request to every city that joins the campaign to define which are the actions to set up their targets, their interim targets, and identify in 6 different areas what are the actions that are going to be taken and they're prioritizing. So there are 6 areas that go from energy, transport, clean air, and of course there's one on waste. And there are specific actions the cities Race to Zero is encouraging the cities to take, particularly related to methane and waste. Just to share a few of them with you here today, from reduce organic disposals to landfill and incinerators at least on a 25% by 2025, or to reduce solid waste generation per capita. That's an 8% by 2025 and a 15% by 2030, or to reduce solid waste disposals to landfills by 50% in 2030, according to 2015. So, as you can see, there are very specific actions with goals and targets that these cities are designing in their plans, are committing. On the reporting side, we yet don't have this information in detail. I cannot tell you how many of these cities, which are the actions that have taken and the progress they have done there, but we are, and this is on the process of the campaign, we're working towards collecting the data. I'm not sure if we're going to get to this level of granularity, but we're definitely collecting the data on how they're doing on the pledge, the plans, and their own reports.
Sorry, because we have one good microphone, but that's okay. And thank you, Ramiro, because that is exactly what we need to know. You know, we have a partnership with the UN Climate Champion team, so we are going to work on this breakthrough. So it's exactly what we need to know and to understand on the waste sector, because the waste sector is so different, for example, than with the energy sector. You know, there you have a lot of data, there you have a lot of information. Here we don't have that many information, and it's not well organized. So we need to have this conversation and to say, of course, we have a goal, we want to have strategies, plans, and then we have to have actions. And for that, we need investment, we need local governments, and we need science. And we have here Gabriel, who is the chief scientist at AGSD. And in general, we have a huge challenge, you know, on how to connect national inventories that we were talking about, you know, which is a top-down approach, with this bottom-up approach. And you have a lot of experience, Gabriel, like making relationships between policies and science data. What do you think about this waste map? What could be like the good approach in order to talk, for example, with local governments and scientists, and also with governments, you know, national governments, because they lead the national inventories, and they need to understand that this is a complement that they could use in order to, for example, MRB their actions. We need more transparency on the actions. We need to have this information in order to have concrete reports on action, and also in order to get the investment that we need. So, Gabriel, we are happy to hear you.
Thank you, Carolina. So, this is a really important initiative, because I'm guessing that no one here has actually seen methane before, unless you've looked through a floor camera, in which case, that's cool. Yes, there we got some. All right. Because our eyes aren't good at seeing it. So we need these kinds of initiatives that allow those who have the ability to respond to and manage emissions from these sites to know what is being emitted and how that might change in response to policies. So this kind of combination of using available and the growing number of resources, there's remote sensing, there's aerial based, but there's also those on the ground floor cameras. So recently, just this summer, the National Academies of Sciences in the United States put out a report on greenhouse gas information systems. And a lot of the pillars for making those information systems useful and trustworthy from policymakers and other stakeholders are exemplified in this project. This iterative engagement is so important, because the information itself is not the action, right? The information is the basis for action. And so we saw early, Laura presented, that methane from waste is about 20% of the global emissions, but that percentage actually varies significantly based on your locality and region. And so there are some areas where this will actually be a very significant source of emissions. And it's very important for those localities to understand that there's a real opportunity there, because when we're talking about the waste sector, we're not just talking about climate, we're actually talking about development. Because improving and enhancing how we treat our waste is directly connected to a lot of development goals in improving human health, sanitation, etc., in addition to the climate benefits of reducing methane emissions, which we've already heard is a major pollutant that is also a source of tropospheric ozone, which is also has an impact on health. So this is a really good example, and I really encourage those who are involved in gathering that data, including the local work, to make an effort to work with other complementary approaches to make this information has as much coverage, but also be as useful as up to date. Because again, when policymakers take actions, it's really important to them to know what the impact is, right? If you install a capture system, but we've seen this in California, if it's not properly maintained, you might check the box on paper, but you still may actually have emissions. And those are the kinds of things that the actors need to know. For private investors, they need to know their investment is actually delivering. One of the last things I'll just close with for awareness, why this is so important, the Climate and Clean Air Coalition just 2 weeks ago released their Global Methane Assessment Baseline Report, and due to increases in population, urbanization, et cetera, we're actually expecting an increase in human-made methane emissions over the next decade of about 10 to 13%, and we need to go the opposite direction, and waste is actually one of those areas that we can make significant differences. There are solutions, there are policies, and there are technologies, there are investors, but this type of data and information, science for climate action, really needs to be mobilized to enable actors to see and seize those opportunities and learn from one another.
Sorry, we're talking about collaboration, so this is a great example, you know? And exactly, Gabriel, you talk about the actors, you know? And here we have Carlos Silva, who is the president of the International Solid Waste Association. So who is the best to talk about this sector, you know, the actors, and how we could partner, we know that we are going to have a partner, to work together on this and to have this mobilization that Gabriel was talking about, you know, to understand this and to have like a safely waste management action, you know, and implementation. What do you think? What are your recommendations also for this? Thank you.
Thank you, Carolina. And first of all, congratulations for the launch of this tool, which will be very instrumental for us to advance, really, really needed. Because when we talk about waste, and usually at ISWA we say, it's not about waste, it's about people. So we are talking about people. If we talk, because it's like an externality of our daily lives. We still are not able to, let's say, divert ourselves from generating waste every day, despite we try a lot. So the first thing I would say to advance is we need to assess the situation. We need to know the situation. And we need to know from where we depart. Then, once we know the situation, we need to plan. We need to develop a strategy. And this strategy must include how to engage all the individuals, how to engage the common citizens to this agenda. Because in ISWA we believe if each one of us, if each inhabitant of this planet really knows the effects, the negative effects of inadequate waste management, we would think better when we have like our consumption patterns, when we have our, let's say, discharging patterns, and when we go and really demand our authorities for a better waste management. And then we need to act. And acting means communicating well. It means developing tools to engage people towards this agenda, and also means to inform people that there are some embedded costs that each one of us needs to pay for the overall waste management systems. And when we look into, like mostly into the developing world, we see that the 3 steps are still missing. So what we believe from ISVA is that we need to improve these kind of integrating tools, and it's only possible through collaboration. So this is the main, I would say, the emerging topic that we really need to deal with, to how to integrate. And here we have like different actors. We have investment banks, we have municipalities, we have science, and we have the operators. So the panel is a great example on how to take the first step in order to move forward.
It's a great example of collaboration, really. Well, thank you, and be prepared, because if you have some questions, we are happy to answer. We are going to do the next round of questions, and we are not going to ask you to give the microphone back to me again. So, yeah, we're going to change a little because it's like crazy. And what I want to ask you for each one of you and each sector that you represent, and I want to thank you, Carlos, because you bring here the people, you know, and the operation, and that is so important, because when we are talking about waste, we are talking about people, we are talking about environmental justice, and we are talking about co-benefits, and we need to include that when we make plans, when we make strategies, when we do like finance evaluation, and when we implement the project. So I want to ask you, considering the sector that you represent, what are your recommendations for the design and for the implementation of this waste map? You know, what do you recommend us beside collaboration? Because that is so obvious, you know, we're going to have that. Now, what do you recommend us to consider in this waste map design and to use it for implementation and for communication, you know, because you are totally right. We need to communicate this, and we need to bring the waste sector here to the climate discussion. We have good news, we have the global methane pledge. We are talking about this at COP, you know, this is so important. We are not used to have waste discussions at COP, you know, so this is so great. But we need to bring more people to this space. So what is your recommendation for the design and for the implementation of this waste map?
I think that from what I saw, the already design, the very good design that you're already having, I think that the conversation with private sector actors and linking it to the NDC or the standards that that country has, and I'm thinking about it from the perspective that many of the, at least multilateral development banks, we have a target of Paris alignment, and to analyze an investment from the Paris alignment perspective, we need to know what the NDC says, we need to know what the sector guidances says, but the private sector does not understand that. So having a conversation with the private sector, knowing that this would be part of the commitment or their contribution to the NDC of the country could be very important. And on the flip side, it also has to do with the disclosure that they will have to do, for example, if they are doing TCFD. And so having that link on where it hurts to the financial sector or to the private sector companies is a good way to engaging them, because they will ask more questions about what else can they do. So in the dialogues, the country dialogues that they are designing, include somehow the private sector, include what they have to report in terms of GRI or TCFD, because that will give them a benefit of knowing that this is linked to other sustainability strategies that they are having in place.
Great, thanks, and congratulations again for the map. It really looks very good. The one who's going to be launched in Mexico, I believe. We're not launching it today. We are seeing it. No, I would say, just saw the global map. I'm not sure how much level of granularity it has. I'm confident it's quite detailed, but I definitely believe that for the cities, they're really interested to see how they come out in this picture. They would like to see the impact of visual images, you know, and those cities that are looking that are bigger and they're looking really bad. This will help as a sort of advocacy, a pressure mechanism. Say, guys, you need to be better in the picture next year. I would definitely would suggest to share the detailed information with all the Race to Zero cities engaged into that. To say, tell me, and let's start measuring this picture year by year and seeing how you're making progress on the future. That is going to be very impactful. Images, it has much more impact than words many times, and I'm quite sure this will help cities to prioritize their efforts on waste in the future.
So there are 6 pillars that we identified that are key, and we encourage the greenhouse gas information system providers to utilize. Usability and timeliness in the context of your users. What format of information that they actually need for their decision making? How timely does it need to be? There are some places where having real-time data is useful, but otherwise it's a yearly basis. So that kind of information and engaging with the people that you want to use this to load that is a first pillar. A second one is transparency. How are your methodologies documented? Are they available so that if people want to compare the data in this database, do they understand how it was collected? So we talk about different methodologies, have different pros and cons, and can be comparable or not. A third one is the data quality and evaluation. How is your data evaluated? That's part of the discussion. How do you compare with others? So that's a really important component for comparability, for integration. For example, again, waste methane is only one GHG source. If this is being compiled with other information, people will want to know how can it be compiled. So that kind of information is also important. Something you're already doing that I encourage more is this inclusivity. How are you engaging people who are on the ground? Who's developing the data? And how are they getting engaged through the process? And how is that improving the quality of the information? And then there's communication, which is actually different, but something you're working on. How do you make available, but also communicate usefully? So what is the platform, and is it meeting the needs of the users that you have? That's 5. There's a 6th one that I'm forgetting. I'll probably remember it after we're done. But I think what you've already announced is very encouraging, but I encourage you to really think about those pillars. Oh, iteration is, I think, the 6th one, or not, but it's a part of it.
Well, I would say, like, the first thing on my perception would be to identify who would be the core group to use the tool. So, because again, when we talk about waste, we are talking about such a diverse group of actors and stakeholders. So we need to focus to whom are we addressing the tool. Once we identify this core group, at least the core group, we need to ensure that the tool is easy for this group to use. So it's accessible, it's easy to understand, it's easy to really input the required information. And I would say the third step would be to develop a kind of a capacity building for the usage of this tool, so everybody can be aware on how to better get the results aimed by the system. And besides that, another suggestion could be to identify other existing tools that could have the same objective. And here I just see now Takeuchi from UN Habitat. We are part of the Waste-Wise Cities platform. They have a very, very interesting tool that we are also helping to develop. So, and there are many others too. So identify existing tools that can be integrated. So we come back to the first point about collaboration, how to integrate and collaborate in order to move forward.
Well, thank you very much and welcome. That's great. Well, we have huge talents, you know, and really good recommendations. We are talking about, of course, identifying existing tools and drive collaboration. We're talking about capacity building with different actors, you know, and we are talking about usability, timely, accessibility, easy to understand. That is so important because when we talk about this, it is so hard to understand. We have a lot of information, but it's disaggregate, and we don't have that like easy to find, and also it's not easy to use. So that is a big issue here. And yes, you are right, Ramiro. We want to have cities, and we want them to see their action like impact, you know. What are the results that they are getting when they do action? And that is so important because when you have that, then you have the private sector, you know. So I came back here, you know, like when you have results, you have investment because you show that this is working, and that is exactly what we want. We know that MDBs now has this goal related with the Paris Agreement, and that's so great, you know, because you need to develop methodologies in order to increase the investment on waste. But you need to have the data, and we need the data to be based on science. We need this data to be transparent, and we need to have the involvement of all the actors like municipalities and also operators. So thank you very much. I don't know if anyone has a question. Please feel free. Yeah, you're welcome. We have to do everything.
Hello, everyone. My name is Pablo Torres. I'm with RTI International, Global Research Institute and International Development Organization. Just to say a few things, kind of comments, questions. There's a couple of primary sources of data for methane abatement. So one is the EPA prepares the International Assessment of Non-CO2 Emissions, mitigation options and mitigation costs to 2050. That is something that RTI is one of the prime implementers for the EPA. Very good source of data. The other one is from IASA, so I think it's what is it, International Institute for Applied Systems Analysis. So that's the sort of global top level. And then, of course, you've got to marry that, as you were saying, Jonathan, with facility level data. So those pilot studies, you know, very interesting, very important. And some of the work we do there, too, is validation of transaction costs. So you've got the mitigation options at the global, national level, but then when transaction costs get in the way, it could be a totally very different number. And then validation, of course, of the actual emissions at the facility level. And then I think we talked about capacity building to be able to move from tier 1 to higher tiers of emissions inventories. So just wanted to share that a little bit. This is very interesting, and we'd love to be able to follow up with some of you on this work.
Yes, you're totally right. And I want to say, we have this global methane assessment that was done by the CCIC, and we have a goal there on the waste sector that is 30 to 35% of reduction by 2030. And that goal is exactly based on EPA and on the International Association, I don't remember also the name, but yeah, IISA, you know, yeah. And yeah, you are exactly, that is what we are looking at. And you are totally right, Pablo, yeah. And when we talk about validation of transaction costs, yes, that is another talent that we need to face, and it's so important, you know, because we need to talk with actors in order to have that. So yes, thanks for the comment. I don't know if anyone wants to add something else, but if not, we have another question. Thank you.
Thank you. Until now, we talked about emission from waste, but what about emission from natural sources like wetlands?
Yeah. No, it's a good question. So one of the reasons, if anyone's watching the methane concentration in the atmosphere, they are going up at an accelerating rate, at the fastest rate since we started measuring in 1983. It's very exciting and actually kind of frightening. A lot of that is biogenic. So there's signatures on our methane. We can tell where it comes from. The problem is biogenic could be natural wetlands or it could be landfills. We actually are not very good at differentiating those two sources. So you're absolutely right, and when we do some of these measurement techniques, one of the questions is what are the natural sources that may be around there that we need? This is why methodology is so important, to differentiate changes in natural sources from these changes in human-related sources. So yes, there are natural sources. They are increasing. It is very frightening to me every time I see a new report on this. So these are natural wetlands. We also have permafrost in the Arctic, lakes. Microbes like it hot, and it's getting hotter. So that is indeed a problem.
So let me just, all of that is absolutely 100% scary and true. But I think the other thing to remember is all of that's happening because the climate's getting warmer. And all of that's happening because the climate's getting warmer. And the only thing that we are going to be able to do to slow down the rate of warming in our lifetimes is to deal with methane emissions. So if we deal with sources like landfills, oil and gas, coal mining, and ag, we have the ability to slow the rate of warming, like how fast we warm, as well as reduce peak warming, and we can do all of that within the next decade or two. If we cut emissions by 40 to 45% by 2030, we're going to knock off 0.3 degrees Celsius from the temperature increase we are seeing. We can't ignore CO2, but this is the only thing we can do that has any hope of preventing some of these really, really scary things like permafrost bomb and all that stuff that people talk about. So, another question?
Hi, my name is Rachel. I'm from UBQ Materials in Israel, and we take waste and we make it into a material. So oftentimes in Israel, we have a problem that we are left behind. But in Israel, like you were saying, 77% of our emissions and methane come from our waste sector because we're an unmanaged landfill system. So our concern is this. We're very small. We have a big problem. We're big emitters, relatively speaking, for the region, and we're going to be disproportionately impacted. What can we do to support the efforts of the platform today out of the Middle East and specifically out of Israel, either as an individual company or a suite of companies, or a government, or even our whole neighborhood participating?
Well, you're so welcome, to work with us, because that is exactly the problem that we have, and we need to work together. We need this type of collaboration, and that is the reason why we need this waste map, to show different regions and to show the problem. So yes, let's talk after this. Maybe Jonathan or Laura, I don't know if you want to say something? Or no, just welcoming. Okay, that's great. That's perfect. Great. So thank you. Yes, I don't know if anyone, yeah, Carlos, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I think that both questions are really connected, and I would build on Jonathan's answer, that it's important to remember, as we talked at the beginning, that data is the most important baseline for us to take action. And just to give some figures from the waste sector, like the waste sector contributes to 3 to 5% of the total global greenhouse gases emissions. But it can mitigate up to 20% of the total greenhouse gases emissions. 5 to 10% can be mitigated by coming from or shifting from inadequate waste management systems to adequate waste management system. So what I mean is stopping open burning and open dumping of waste. And the other 10% can be mitigated by improving the waste management system towards a circular economy, towards having waste as a resource. So we need to integrate both actions. We need to solve the waste management system. We need to implement sound waste management for all, and we need to move towards a more circular economy. And here is the fact. Those emissions from the waste sector are mostly methane and some black carbon mostly. So we present a immediate and cost-effective opportunity to really tackle the emissions and ensure that we'll be on the safe side in terms of climate change and global warming. So here, I don't want to forget the other sectors, but I would really emphasize that the waste sector is the only possibility for us to really reach the goals that we are discussing at this event as COP27. Thank you.
Hi, Rachel. Kate Siegel, Senior Analyst on the methane team at Clean Air Task Force. And I don't want to ignore your question about what you and what Israel can do to interact with WasteMap and the platform. And I think it's a great question because obviously we don't have the capacity to work in every country in our first year. And so the platform itself, our hope is to launch it globally and work in those 5 or 6 countries that we had up on the map. But just because we're not doing a deep dive in Israel this year doesn't mean that we can't work with you to get your more site-specific data into the platform and connect you with peers that have similar problems and are working on similar issues. Because that's the whole point of this project, right, is to make those connections and to foster that site-specific information being used more globally to give us a better understanding of this problem and find better solutions and scale everything much more quickly than we're doing right now. Yeah, so thank you for that.
No, that's exactly the point. You know, we need you, and we need to have the information. You know, that's the important part. And I want to say something about the global warming potential. You know, why we are talking about methane is because it lasts only 12 years. You know, and when we have that numbers that you were talking about, Carlos, we are using now in our national inventories the global warming potential for 100 years. Okay, which is 26% for methane, or 26 for methane. But when we talk about the global warming potential for 20 years, then we have 80 times, you know, like methane when we compare with CO2. And that is why we are talking about methane action implementation during this decade and the next one, because we need this action to be done during this decade and the next one, no more, you know? And that is exactly what Jonathan was saying, you know? We need to reduce methane in order to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050. So we are working together on that goal. This is not different. We are helping countries, you know, and local governments and different actors to get to their carbon neutrality goal, which is science, which is what IPCC has told us in the special report of 1.5. So I want to say that in order to finish this conversation. Thank you very much to everyone, and hope to see you on COP28 with the results, you know? Thank you very much. And we're going to have a photo with the panel.